don't be afraid to be a copywriter's worst nightmare,
Yeah.
because I break grammatical rules all the time,
Yeah.
and it's all for the sake of giving something new.
Welcome to a very special episode of the Novelry on Writing. To celebrate our brand new prize, The Next Big Story, we've got 5 bonus episodes here to help you write a standout entry, delving into the 5 elements that make a story great. 1. Person. 2. Problem. 3. Place. 4. Plot. And 5. Prose. Now, we're going to dig into these in the next episodes, and you can watch them whether it's on your lunch break, whether you're out at work, whether you're cooking in the evening, wherever you can find the time. Because story ideas can come to you anytime and any place. For the next big story, we're offering a grand prize of $100,000 for just 3 pages of writing. Yes, just 3 pages of the beginning of a novel, that's all. So, what should those pages include? Let's find out in this very special podcast episode. This is the Novelry on Writing.
Hi, my name is Tara Conklin. I am a writing coach here at the Novelry in literary fiction and historical fiction and women's fiction. I am a novelist and a teacher. I live in Seattle, and my books are The House Girl, The Last Romantics, and my most recent called Community Board.
Hey, I'm Urban Waite, one of the coaches at the Novelry. I write crime and thrillers, and with a little bit of like a literary bent. Um, and I also am one of the book reviewers for the San Francisco Chronicle.
Urban, hey, we're here to talk about prose. And I wanted to ask first, what does that word mean to you? What is prose? How do you define it?
I think of sentences and paragraphs and just the way that they come together on the page, the way that they, bring the reader along through your story.
Hmm.
That's the prose.
For sure. When we read good prose, it has a rhythm and a voice that's all its own. I mean, like Hemingway, for example, is probably someone that everyone has heard about or read in some classroom or read some of his novels or short stories, but he has such a distinctive voice, and his prose is so beautiful and simple. I often think of him as like a prose master.
Yeah. Short sentences, declarative sentences, beautiful descriptions of setting,
Yeah.
a very little interior look into your character, and sort of letting the reader imagine.
This gets to one of the elements that I think is really important in writing good prose is the balance between clarity and lyricism. How would you explain that to a new writer?
Well, even for us old writers,
Yeah.
we get in trouble for this. So it is finding the balance between, not writing purple prose, not going overboard, reining yourself in at times. I mean, I could write setting for days. I just love setting, but I know that I sort of have to rein it in because I need the plot to keep moving, the reader to keep going through the work, keep imagining, keep moving the story.
Yeah, I have a very similar challenge when I sit down to write because I love words and I love kind of random, obscure, bizarre words, but they have to be used very sparingly in prose, I think, because it can confuse the reader. And it can sound like purple prose, overwriting.
Yeah.
I think overwriting is something that I see a lot in beginner writers. They think that in order to be sort of serious or write in a literary voice, that you need to use, foot long words and convoluted sentences that often weighs against clarity, and you certainly don't want your language to confuse your reader. I often think of it as like painting. You're painting this portrait for this picture, whether it's a setting or a person, for your reader, and you can be kind of impressionistic, but you still want them to know
Yeah.
what you're painting the picture of.
Don't overdo it. Write as you speak, write as you think. We don't think in, 20 letter words,
Yeah,
So,
exactly. So that's one pitfall, I think, purple prose and overwriting. You also have the pitfall of cliches. How do you define cliche?
a saying or term that is way too overused, it's like a crutch. You can throw one in every once in a while, but you want to be original. You want to create something that delights the reader, that they might have thought of before, they might have seen before, but the moment that you put the words on the page and create the scene for them, they're like, oh, yes, I see that. Don't overuse something that you've heard a million times. That
Yeah.
is a cliche.
Exactly. I think especially with the pages for the Novelry Prize, I mean, it's such a short sample.
Yeah.
You want to show your own unique voice without using turns of phrase that, yeah, that people have heard before. I mean, so maybe we should give some examples of cliches, like hard as a rock or dumb as a post or I don't know. What's your favorite cliche? Do you have one?
um,
Or I should say your least favorite cliche.
Spice is the variety of life. Is that a cliche? Yeah, I was like,
Yeah.
no, am I missing that up?
Variety is the spice of life.
Yes,
But
yes. There it is. I don't use cliches. I don't even know what they are,
yeah,
I can't even get them right.
banish them from your mind.
Yes.
The one place where I do sometimes use a cliche is in dialogue because it can say a lot about a character if they speak in kind of overused cliches. It can show that they're not a very creative person. They tend to think in a certain established way. So I do sometimes use them in dialogue.
Yeah.
I'm Jan Martel, the author of Life of Pi, The High Mountains of Portugal, and Self, and I'm delighted to be a judge for the next big story from the novel. My fellow judges and I are looking for fresh voices in fiction. No experience necessary. You could win $100,000 for just 3 pages of a story, and the opportunity to turn your story idea into a novel. So start writing and enter today. See the website for details, terms, and conditions.
But let's talk about dialogue because dialogue, of course, is part of prose.
I can purple prose up my dialogue. I can overwrite my dialogue. And so that's just something that I personally am aware of. Some people, they're so good at it. Screenwriters, people who know, like, look, I've got a word limit. I gotta get this out there. And so I tend to try to write like a screenwriter. You have a certain, a limit of what you can put down, and you need to
Mhm.
get the message across. For dialogue, it needs to serve a purpose. It needs to transport your reader. It needs to get them from one place to the other, but it also, reveals certain things. So
And I think a common misconception about dialogue on the page is that it should represent speech as it's actually spoken between people, which of course we all speak like idiots. So your dialogue should be a little bit more to the point. I mean, it needs to be to the point, as you were saying. It has to have
yeah,
intention. I try and give at least one of my characters in any exchange a specific agenda. Like this is what they need to do in this part of dialogue. It's where I edit the most too. Like I know that I'm going to write the dialogue, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to cut out a third of the words, and then I'm going to go out again and I'm going to cut out more of those words. So I just like having it be short and snappy.
oh yeah, you cut all that stuff, like, hello, how are you? I'm fine. Like you gotta get rid of that stuff. Like that stuff does, we all do that, but
Yeah,
you have to make it
yeah,
tight. Yeah.
exactly. Especially if you've got to get yourself across in 3 pages. So I was thinking of actual like concrete tips for writing good prose. Maybe we can just talk through a few, but one that I came up with is varying your sentence length and structure. Sometimes I'll read a student work that's, it's like subject, verb, subject, like, and all the sentences are pretty much the same kind of construction and the same length. And I'm like, yawn,
Yeah.
you really have to change that up. And sometimes you have to do it like really consciously, like read a paragraph and realize that no, you have to, have some shorter sentences. Maybe you're starting with your preposition instead of putting it at the end. Do you have any, what would you say would be like a concrete tips
Um,
and tricks with Urban and Tara?
yeah. Uh, don't be afraid to be a copywriter's worst nightmare,
Yeah,
because I break grammatical rules all the time,
yeah,
and it's all for the sake of giving something new. Human speech is not grammatical. Like you do one word sentences, you sort of invent, you live, you're surprised, you want your reader to feel like they're living and being surprised and entertained. You don't want to be so repetitive that your reader's going to sleep.
yeah.
So vary things up, try to get your impression of the world across.
That reminds me of what I consider the one true rule in writing, which is don't be boring.
Yes.
We want it simple. We don't want cliches, but also try not to repeat yourself.
Agreed. Yeah.
Any other prose tips or tricks?
No, I mean, I have some prompts. I have one prompt. This is something that I always struggle with, but um, especially when I'm introducing characters, I'll try to set up a couple characters that know each other, but then introduce one. Either it's in the first person or third person who is maybe admitting something to themselves that they've never admitted to themselves before, and obviously letting the reader in on a little secret, a little something that maybe the other character in the scene doesn't know.
Mm-hmm.
um, and then one sentence of setting, set everything up, and then just get into the dialogue and treat it like a screenwriter. Short, quick, no he said, she said, they said. And if you're really doing a great job with that dialogue, you will need very little he said, she said, they said, because you should know who's speaking as you go down through the dialogue. And then just finish it out with another little paragraph that moves the work along. This is what this character took from that. This is what the character's thinking. This is where the character wants to go. I guess my prompt is set up a small scene, see how it works for you. Hopefully, it will reveal something for you.
It's a great prompt.
Yeah.
So mine is less a prompt and a kind of homework suggestion to really refine your prose and get your language as tight as it can possibly be. I always recommend that people read their work aloud. Close the door, don't be self-conscious, just pick up your pages and listen to how they sound. And there are also programs that can do this for you now too. Your pages can be read to you in Gwyneth Paltrow's voice, or a British accent or something.
Yeah.
And because I do think that in hearing the words spoken, you get a different view on it, just hits in a different way. So I would highly recommend every person, before you submit your entry, read it out loud and edit it accordingly.
I love that. I absolutely, because it's true.
Yeah,
I
it's
spend
really
half
true.
yeah half my day in here just like talking to myself. So,
Absolutely. Me too.
these are just some tips to get you writing, to hopefully get you winning 3-page submission. I think the best thing I can put forward here is just to write what you love. Put something down that you want other people to read.
Those are great words of advice, Urban. It was so fun to talk to you today about prose. And yeah, good luck to everyone and happy writing. Until next time.
Thank you for joining us today. We're so pleased to have you along for the writing journey, and we hope to see you on another episode of The Novelry on Writing. If you'd like to learn more, visit us at thenovelry.com. From first draft to finished manuscript, at The Novelry you'll enjoy one-to-one coaching from best-selling authors, live writing classes with award-winning authors and literary agents, and you'll work with a publishing editor all the way for submission to literary agents toward a publishing deal. All writers learn from other writers, even the greats. Write your novel in good company. Join us at the Novelry. We'll show you how to start, coax your story into shape, cheer you on to type the end.